Today we are talking about the dancing plague of 1518. So to start off, in 1518 laid medieval Strasbourg along the Rhine River, which at the time was a part of the Roman Empire, and this is where this all took place. So at the time the city was facing a lot of difficulties. They're experiencing a very hot summer. The winter before had been very harsh, which meant they were facing a famine because all of the crops had froze. And then on top of that, there was many hailstorms and high winds, which destroyed all remaining crops. At that time as well, there was many orphanages that were overpacked with kids whose parents either died or abandoned them because they could not feed them. So a lot of famine, a lot of harshness, a lot of difficulties going on. And then on top of that, a new disease called syphilis was running rampant through Europe while the Black Plague had just been dying down. So they were kind of already facing a lot of trauma with diseases. All of this led to the clergy thinking that it was the end of time. So a lot of people believed that at the time because all of these awful things were happening. They thought that the end of times was upon them.
Wow, that was pretty rough for them. The Roman Empire was rapidly declining as a big power. And a year ago, prior to that, Martin Luther posted his 95 Theses, sparking the Protestant Reformation. With that, at the countryside of Strasbourg, many peasants were rebelling against the clergy, and they were, taken down. Many social contracts were completely falling apart, causing more of a fragmentation between the nobles and peasants. Strasbourg sat in the St. Vincent corridor, which is very important for location-wise. More background and situation we're talking about with the dancing plague of 1518. This was not the first dancing plague in St. Vincent or around the area. Many people grew up hearing tales of people being cursed to dance by the devil to death.
Yeah, so basically they had all been growing up hearing those stories. So on the hottest day in July of 1518, a peasant woman named Frau Schwafera began to dance. So people immediately assumed Frau Schwafera was cursed by St. Vincent. But some also believed it was an act of protest against the city, who had just recently passed a law to ban any type of begging in the streets. And important info for later is that Frau Schwafera had actually just been at a protest 3 days prior to this about the ban on begging in the streets. She had started dancing and stuff, and then it kind of chained on, and it went from being 3 people that started dancing to 48. It just got worse and worse, and instead of the clergy's first attempt to stop it was to actually build them stages, and that did the exact opposite, and that's what we will talk about next.
We ask ourselves why Raffaella would have started to dance. Raffaella's last hope for income and survival was crushed by the new law by the city to end begging in the streets. And so she began to protest. And she was at the protest 3 days prior, like you mentioned, but also this could, spark a new one against the city. But she also, she could have been expressing something her body could not, something words can't do, actions speak louder than words. So she could have been doing that. After she began to dance, only 3 people joined her at first, of course. And after a week of dancing, we know 34 people joined her, and dancers did not respond to the names and fought with strength against people who were trying to stop them from dancing.
So basically, the city saw all of these people dancing out on the streets, and they were like, what's up with this? Like, we need to stop this. This is awful. Like, these people have bruises on their feet. They're bleeding out. Some already had died from fatigue. The city had assumed that these dancers were dancing because their bodies were overheating and the blood was rushing to their heads, causing them to just start dancing, which obviously we know now is completely untrue. That would never happen. Usually when you're hot, you would just lay down. To counteract this, they had built stages assuming that after a while they would just stop dancing and it would die down, but the exact opposite happened. So by August 10th, 400 dancers had joined. They completely switched their diagnosis, and they dictated that it was divine punishment for all of the sin that then had been happening in the city, from gambling to prostitution. Then the stages were torn down and the bands were stopped, like just completely got torn down, and they ended up taking the dancers in a wagon with arms and legs bound to these wagons to the temple of St. Vincent. And they were told to take little crosses and wear these silly little red shoes and just dance around this fire. And then it actually ended up curing them. And they did a holy dance, and they were all like, wow, I'm cured. Like, it was crazy. So relating back to how it could have started, a historian in the 1970s by the name of Eric Midler proposed that they had actually been poisoned by ergot, which grows on rye bread. But then in 2008, historian John Waller published the most known study of this, and he concluded that it was a mass psychogenic illness or mass hysteria. I don't think it was caused by any kind of supernatural thing. It was caused by psychological issues with these people.